Good evening, welcome to Freedom and You. Always glad to be here on Q95 F Radio, the big station, to dialogue with you and discuss the issues confronting us as a country, as a people. And of course, you call in and express your views very respectfully. And we always say, when you come on, do it as briefly as possible, and let's do it in good taste. So a little later, we will take your calls and we will discuss with you. But for now, let us just extend our heartfelt sympathy to the family, Mrs. Lansort and her children and extended family on the passing of her husband, Mr. Emil Lancelot. Mr. Lancelot was a public servant in the news, media, radio, and paper, a strong man in his church, in his community, soft-spoken but very effective, and very kind individual. So again, we extend our heartfelt sympathy to Mrs. Lancelot, her children, and of course, the extended family of the late Emil Lancelot. And to Miss Diana Jolly, she was ruled before she married. So Diana Rule Jolly, affectionately known as Charlene, my cousin, in fact, she's my first cousin, who passed away last night from the community of Jimmet, and of course with relatives in Campbell, in Bells, and so on. So again, our heartfelt sympathy goes to her father, her mother, her brothers and sisters, and of course, grandchildren, and her husband, and the rest of the family. Also, Sonia Lloyd, a cultural icon in our country, left us a couple of days ago. She was one person who was very much involved at every independent season. We expect to hear her, see her, and feel her. But she took this with pride, and she stood as a beacon for our culture in Dominica. So we extend sympathy to her relatives and friends, and of course, to her family. And all those who lost loved ones in the past month, we want to extend our heartfelt sympathy and to say, yes, mourn, but don't mourn like those without hope, because, when these things come to you, it always come to you as a shock. But the Almighty Father knows better, and He will keep you strong and able to deal with your loss.
Yes, absolutely. Um, uh, as you said, we lost an icon recently, and this is a great loss for the country. But as we always say, someone like that was made such a fundamental, serious contribution to our culture, our community, our lived experience. Miss Sonia Lloyd has certainly, embodied that sort of contribution, and we wish to recognize that. I think the entire country has recognized that, and well done, good soldier. You have certainly done your part to make our country a better country, a more interesting country, and to capture the spirit of our ancestors.
Yeah.
So we wish you a good journey. Of course, we say sympathy, of course, to all the others who have lost loved ones. Again, every Dominican makes a contribution to our country in one way or the other, and we want to recognize and salute you when you move on to the next phase of what's there for you. So we want to share that.
Yes.
All I would add to that is sincere condolences to you also and your relative in the past, and that is the road. There's nothing more I can say about Sonia. She's somebody that must be remembered, and I would have prayed that persons like her would be recognized long before the death.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Party Leader. Thank you, Mr. Astafan. And of course, we move on because, as I said, we have a packed agenda. The time goes so quickly when you have a lot to say. Well, DFP, YFM, we are still inviting persons to join the party. Membership is open to those who want to join the party. Let's continue to build the Freedom Party and make it strong so that Dominica can have a very good alternative in terms of the parties to govern the affairs of our beautiful country. And of course, Jeff Bennett is here with us, and I'm sure he has a few plans for the Soufriere area. And let me just go on to Jeff. Jeff, good evening.
Good evening to you, Bosso. Good evening to you, Party Leader. Good evening, Michael. And good evening to all of your listeners. It's good to be here this evening with you guys.
Good evening, Jeff.
Yes, Jeff. Definitely good evening.
Yes. And Jeff, before we go into the meat of the topics we have, lower down on the agenda, on the DFP YFM matter, I hear you're planning some stuff for the Soufriere constituency. Can you tell us?
Yes, indeed. The people of the Soufriere Scott Ghana Point Michelle, I really want to thank them for their support with all of what we've done through YFM and other organizations to help the community grow. And on Sunday, 17th of July, God's willing, that's Sunday 17th, in 2 weeks, we'll be doing a big celebration recognizing and remembering two of our great icons during the month of July, Cada Sleeps a Month. And these two icons are Big A, Aurelius Vincent Lai. He was elected to the village council twice by the people, disabled guy, but did very well and always helped towards the community of Soufriere Scots at Gallia. And people know Big A Shop always used to push Dominica's music. And it's really appropriate since July is kind of slips a month that we work with Creole Heartbeat organization and also Kubali, one of the sponsors, has come together for us to remember those two icons in Scottsdale. And the other person is Mighty Acre. I'm sure a lot of you remember Mighty Acre with great hits like Top Up and Papa Bondier and all these songs. Mighty Acre actually got another name from Dominica's Creole icon himself, Wadix, what they call him Papa Acre. So Eka and Biggie will be remembered. Eka has been participating in Calypso shows throughout the country. He's been singing Scott Cedric in little shows since he was 10, 11 years old. So on Sunday, July 17th, big celebration there for Biggie and Eka. We're going to be remembering those two. We'll start the event with a church service, 10 a.m. Soufriere Scott said choir coming together at the Scott Church, and then it will be followed by a lot of activities, including domino competition between Team Biggie, Team Eka, and a lot of sports activities, prizes, and also a plaque given to the families to remember them. So these are some of the things going on in there. And also, I must say too, we are looking at some of the projects for the Soufriere Scott area. One of the things that I've been in contact with some people, and then particularly in the Galion area, we are really working hard to see if we can secure property to have some sort of sporting complex for the people of Galion, where they can have a basketball court, they can play softball, cricket, or table tennis, and negotiations going on the way to see if that property will be available, that they can make that a community project for the people of Galion. One of the things we're looking at as well, and one of your callers looking into this program, Mr. Nicholas, was in St. Thomas from the Scottsdale area also, is working with us and has told us that he's very interested in helping in sponsoring through his organization in St. Thomas with sporting equipment for the people, for the youngsters of Soufriere Scottsdale to play. We also looking at some of the projects we've been interested into is to like upgrade the playing field at the Brooklyn playing field, bring cricket back in Point Michelle, Soufriere Scottsdale, in a grand style. And some other projects that to be talked about as we go down, we can look at the way that we are going to focus as a government, if the opportunity given, and that the support that we've been getting in that constituency is great. And we're looking that we can make some of these projects a reality, because one of the things we're looking at, not to do a Viki thing, corner thing, but bring corner back in a way that the benefits from those funds, from the activity, will go into building bus stops in the Soufriere Scottsdale area, Gallio area. We can fix or bridge our drains or roads in the little areas, street lights, put up monuments. We believe that our people need to be remembered. And then we really want to let people know what the Freedom Party is getting to do behind the scene and the help it's getting from people in the community that are ready to make those contributions. So a lot of exciting stuff to happen in that constituency.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. And of course, we want to wish you well, and the people of Soufriere, Scottsdale, Gallia, Point Michelle want to wish you well. Working with them, there are a number of persons there who are looking forward for working together to build or to continue to build the constituency, which include Point Michelle, Soufriere, Gallia, Scottsdale, and so on. So a little later we can say something more about this. But to move on, we want to congratulate Dr. Herbert Sabroch, his PhD, the ceremony to bestow upon him his his certificate was held on the 24th of June of this year. So we want to say big up to Dr. Herbert Sabroch and well done. Of course, the new government of Grenada, Carriacou and Petit Martinique, I followed the campaign there, and I can tell you both parties had excited campaign. Both parties had youth with them. And if you look at the results in Grenada, it is not far apart from each other. The National Democratic Congress won 9 seats out of the 15, and the NNP won 6 seats, and so forth. Former Prime Minister Michel won his seat and won it well, and 5 others. And we want to congratulate Dixon Michel, the new Prime Minister of Grenada. In fact, I was looking at him at the CARICOM meeting over the weekend there, and I think he started on a very, very good footing. We want to wish him well and wish Grenada well. And of course, the West Indies cricket, we had cricket here. The first day, Saturday, was rained out, and the Sunday, God gave us good weather, and cricket went on until the end. West Indies won. Congratulations to them. And of course, I want to say the organizers take a bow, because the Windsor Park was well decorated, well prepared, and of course, you saw that level of involvement of other persons in terms of the cultural groups from around the country, including the Kalinago territory. And for all the many students graduating this fall, I want to say congratulations to them and to wish them well, and say you do not stop after your graduation from secondary school or from primary school or wherever. If at college, you continue to prepare yourself so that you can become an asset to yourself and that of your community and country.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Congratulations to all the folks, and as you've really done well. I don't have too much to add on this. To the new students who graduated, definitely congratulations. I know you think this is one of the most, doing your exams and so on is one of the most stressful times of your life, you think, and that now it's all good, it's all fine, and now it's rosy, and it's all good. But it's the beginning. We let you into the little secret. It's the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. So you will soon be back in it, but it's a good journey. It's a good journey to grow as a human being and to become a productive member of your community and to help us transform this beautiful island we were lucky to inherit into something special. So welcome to the club. You have taken the first step, and we look forward to working with you.
Yes. But do you have any comments?
Well, also, well, I must congratulate who will start working with me, because I know that it's a very massive contribution, not only to him and the Freedom Party, but to Dominica. And Sabi, all the best. Now, the new government of Grenada is a new dispensation in our politics. I like his approach. I like his involvement with young and the old. And I just like how we challenge CARICOM and the issue he raised on Riyadh. I think he's on my book as one of the most promising young prime ministers I've ever seen.
I hope you stay in that track.
Well, he's a bright boy like our leader, and I hope that he doesn't disappoint me, because I was looking for that person in the region who would come forward and present hope for the people of CARICOM. We have some of our leaders in CARICOM that figure all we can do is sell passports. The fact that this is Riyadh was critical to not only our integration, but creating development and generating things. I was expecting to hear from him on the ECCB losing $193 million, which is of great concern to me, because it tells you that when you sell passports, no matter how many billions you make selling passports, you're not producing anything tangible to bring development to your people, and it's affecting our central bank. So, I want to congratulate him and his government. West Indies cricket, I'm a fan of cricket and West Indies, and I saw Dominica brought to the fore a life into West Indian cricket. And the cricketers felt it. Listening to Powell and the other cricketers from the region talking about how they felt just being in Dominica tells me that Dominica has tremendous potential. And we need to find a way to bring that forward. And as everything else, our graduating students, I wish them all the best. And the challenges of life is at their footsteps. And graduating is not all. They're just going into life now, and they have to meet the challenges. So I wish them all the best.
Yes.
And I hope our leadership will give them some avenues for getting the best.
Well, we would hope so, but I think new leadership is what they need right now. So that's the direction that we move.
We move in. But just to, before we leave the grid issue there, just to say though, I followed the campaign, and I can tell you our electoral commission here should go to Grenada to learn something. Because as soon as Prime Minister Mitchell announced election, the electoral commission and the electoral office took charge. And they conducted that election professionally.
Yes.
You saw the candidates on both sides of the various constituencies after the vote would come and speak to the media and praise the professionalism that they exhibited in the polling station and around the country from the electoral office and electoral commission conducting the election. So that was good because democracy is important and you can't give any single party to conduct election because obviously they'll conduct it in their interests. So that is why we have the electoral commission to be the referee in these very, very important activities. On public issues, public matters, we have to come back to our days of cleanliness. And you walk around the road and sidewalk, and you see a lot of KFC wrappings, KFC bags, and food around the place, and other things. And people should make it their business that if you're traveling in a vehicle and you have garbage in the vehicle, to keep your garbage until you reach to a point where you can dispose of it properly, or even take it to your home and put it in your own garbage, because the garbage truck is on the move in most of the areas. So we just have to keep our country clean, because when the environment is clean, it's not only for visitors, but it's for us as well who live here. And I just want, from this platform here, to call on Dominicans all over Dominica to take heed of indiscriminate dumping of rubbish all around the place.
Certainly. I mean, it's not good for the environment. It's not good for the aesthetics. It doesn't look good to visitors. But it also demonstrates, we have to be a country of discipline, right? We have to be a country where we follow the rules so that we all have a better life experience. And simply, disrupting the environment, making it ugly, dumping things around, making it untidy, shows a lack of concern for our fellow citizens. And so these little things do matter. The concept of the broken windows theory. If you randomly throw things around, it shows you don't really have a respect. It's a symptom of lack of a respect and discipline in your society, and we have to do the little things so that we build that sense of accountability and respectability for each other.
Yes.
But on this issue of dumping of garbage, public matters, I support party leader 100%. But there are certain things that we need to add to that. How we treat our rivers, how we treat our land. The problems we have in our rivers and our land existed a century ago as a result of the hurricane in 1916 and 19. There were developments that led to putting in counter drains wherever you tampering with our land. We introduced in the turn of the century lemongrass into Dominica and was exporting lemongrass oil and citronella oil by a guy named Gunther who set up some place in the Sylvania area. There were railroad tracks carrying the lemongrass to the production site. Okay. Now this has created some grasslands on our coast, which is encroaching our forest reserves. We need to look at that very carefully as a public matter. because that in itself could damage Dominican's water resource, our rivers, our water. So we need to look at that very seriously. Just recently, I heard some talk about that, and I welcome it. And we need to really address those matters, because Dominica will not be Dominica if we ignore our rivers and the damage the grasslands is doing to our forests. Every year, when there's a forest fire, it encroaches and takes part of our forest, and it burns. And we need to attack that seriously and bring back the forest towards our coast rather than into our reserve.
Yes. Okay, well, the virus is still around. So party leader, the virus is still around.
It's still around. We want to make sure that we do not forget this. None of the dynamics have really changed about this. It's still a very serious virus. It can have very serious consequences, especially for those who are not vaccinated. We still have to practice caution. It has to become a new normal. I think it is part of our normal, but that will change slowly as people get exhausted of the protocols and get exhausted and simply want to live their lives. That represents a dangerous point for us. We have to navigate that transition, well, in order not to, have things go downhill again and have to start from ground zero. So it's still an issue. We will keep talking about it. We will at least keep that idea and that thought and in the Dominican mindset, in the Dominican cloud of consciousness, so that we do not forget that it is an issue that we must constantly monitor. It's like a chronic disease that we must now monitor and keep under control.
Yes. Jeff, do you have any advice for the listeners?
Well, the coronavirus, people have to realize it's not just going to go away like that. Good thing that from the last report from the government of Dominica, like about 35,000 people of the population vaccinated, which is approximately 50% of the population. That's good news. I would like them to proceed with caution. I do support the fact of the need for wearing masks in open public places is something that we can put behind our back. But I would like to caution with small indoor space that we should still wear masks. I will advise the government of Dominica that someone dealing with this kind of work, that removing the mask mandate in small indoor places is not the best thing right now, but definitely in the open public, I would definitely say it's time we get rid of those masks in the open public space. But in small confined place, I think people still need to be cautious, be vigilant, and let's don't get ahead of ourselves there. We should still follow some of those procedures that is for our own benefit. And if you're one of those persons who still wonder whether you should get vaccinated, I strongly encourage you to get vaccinated. So we are going in the right direction. As I said a few months ago on this program, we could see the light at the end of the tunnel on which we are going. And boss, I really must congratulate you guys too on the Freedom on Your program, who has always been on top of that coronavirus and always give factual information, not friction, but very factual information. You guys did the research, had the people behind you guys to give you the information you need, and has really well educated Dominican public on your program. And I think when I'm looking back at all the political parties, I think the Freedom Party deserves a lot of credit for the work they have done in giving people facts about this virus. So we are going in the right directions, and I will encourage the government to remove the mask mandate in open public places, but in small indoor places, we should probably keep this on until we can get someone vaccinated or we totally get rid of it.
Yeah, well,
The new developments in the coronavirus situation, countries have data going back from the time it started, and I hope that could add to the science and so that we will see coming up from that some development as to how you get herd immunity, the best way to do it, and how do you maintain a series of disciplines that will minimize the spread of the virus, because there's some serious issues right now with the new developments and the data coming out of Europe, Africa, the Far East. So I'm hoping that pretty soon that information will get to the public and we'll see some new protocols being set to ensure that the virus will be subsided or disappear for good.
Yes. In fact, I should have let the listeners know what the topics are we are entering into now. We just dealt with the coronavirus. Next thing we do, the hurricane season. Then we're going into the adoption of um, the young lady from the young girl,
Yes.
Kanisha Warner, and we'll do lecture reform and our energy vulnerability. We'll look at that as well as our vision for creating a new Dominica economy. But just to say, while we're still on the coronavirus, quickly, we want to commend all those who work during the what they call struggle days of the virus, doctors, the nurses, the ambulance persons in the fire department, in the police who are out there, and even those who make themselves available, because they were private people who was used to take you to Portsmouth and out back from Portsmouth. Because when the coronavirus started, everybody was afraid and felt did not want to be close to anybody.
Even some members of the taxi association also, they would sanitize you when you come from overseas and traveling with them to ensure that when you enter Dominica, you don't bring in the virus.
Yes.
And I must
Commend them.
I was very impressed when I was traveling between 2020 and 2022. It was very so you must come in those members who took their jobs very seriously
and stood up for the country to ensure that the virus. In fact, I had my experience in Portsmouth, and I can tell you they did a very good job. I mean, in the beginning, it started in a very rugged way, but as it went in, settled down nicely. Okay, well, we're in the hurricane season, and we saw last weekend this weather system was a bit, disorganized. But we have with us Mr. Cecil Shillingford, who is a disaster risk management specialist, and we're so happy to have him. He served here as the head of the disaster preparedness organization. He's also, at some point, was a consultant to them, and also he did that work as well in the rest of the regional federal field. So Cecil, it's all yours now to tell us where we are in terms of the various mentioned hurricanes and what to expect.
Okay, good evening, Bosso. Thanks for having me, and good evening to the rest of the panel. As you said, we are in the hurricane season, and the hurricane season runs from June to November every year. June has been a very rainy month, and that is because of the passage of several tropical waves during the period. The prediction for this year is for an above average hurricane season where we can have 14 to 21 named storms, of which 6 to 10 could become hurricanes, and then 3 to 6 of those could be major hurricanes. We've had an early start to the season. 3 storms have been named or were formed and have been named so far in June and the first week of July. And those were Tropical Storm Alex, Tropical Storm Bonnie, and Tropical Storm Colin. This year's first named storm, Tropical Storm Alex, developed 5 days after the start of the hurricane season. So that's about the 5th of June. And then the second storm about a month later, and that was Tropical Storm Bonnie, which formed after passing south of the Caribbean and quickly made landfall along the Costa Rica-Nicaragua border. And then Tropical Storm Colin unexpectedly was formed along the coast of South Carolina, but was very short-lived. We can all recall last week when we had the turbulent weather pattern, and that was as a result of the tropical wave that was passing south of the Caribbean. Well, of course, it went through Trinidad as a tropical storm, and then south of Grenada. But Grenada was affected, and some of our islands. I know for sure St. Vincent was also affected with heavy rains and flooding. Dominica, and then it slipped past and went into the Costa Rica, Nicaragua area. Well, some of the secondary events when we have hurricane conditions would be flooding due to heavy rains and also swollen rivers, landslides, rock falls, which we know too very well, especially in the areas of on the west coast and also Soufriere Scott's Head area, and some of it into the Grand Bay area where we have landslides. And one of the advice we would want to give at this stage, since we are not yet so deep into the season, is for the authorities to look at doing some clearing of the rivers, some dredging, river dredging, and maybe cutting a lot of the bush that is growing in a lot of the rivers, because that inhibits the flow of the water when you have heavy rain. So that should be looked at. Ravines, also clearing of ravines, and that is because we dump a lot of old stuff in the ravine, and those things cause sometimes the water that flows through the ravines to back up, and then you create a dam situation where you're damming the water, preventing the free flow, and then at some stage the water at the back of the dam gets a little too heavy and pushes that stuff down and comes down very forcefully. And close to communities, it can be very, very dangerous. And if we are going to be doing any dredging of rivers, we should also look at some river training. In terms of some of the tips for our residents, they have to look at shelters. First and foremost, their own shelter, where they're living, and if they're going to decide if there is a storm or hurricane, that they want to continue staying there. If they want to move to public shelters would be open whenever these events are threatening. Supplies, water and food, and it's not too early to stock up on site. No times are hard these days, but still you should stock up on some food and water, dried food and water, because when you get to the shelter, there's nobody there providing you with food and water, unless we are hit and several days later that the authorities decide to provide those things to shelterees and also to the general public. Repairs should be effected to your homes, your personal shelters, if that needs to be done, and you should try to do that quickly, because time passes by so quickly. Very soon we'll be in the peak of the season, which is around August and September. I certainly want to call on communities to be very proactive, and the people in the community to assist with community preparedness, such as clearing of drains, clearing of ravines, and clearing of waterways, cutting of overhanging branches and dangerous trees that could fall and damage property, and also hurt, injure, or kill people. And finally, I would hope that people would remain alert during the hurricane season, and also always listen out almost on a daily basis, because the way sometimes these tropical waves spring up, and then in no time they become tropical storms and can even become hurricanes. We all have to be alert and listen to your local radio station, your local authorities. I know we can pick up a lot of stuff on the internet, but it's much better if you listen to the local authorities, especially the Met services in the various islands, because they would sort of, while what you will get on the internet would be a sort of a global view, you'd get more of a local perspective from the local Met services. And just to say, we want to wish everyone a safe hurricane season, and we are really hoping that we do not see the likes of Erika and Maria and Hurricane David and things of that, because we really cannot afford this at this time, given the global given the global conditions, and even our own local conditions here in Dominica, economically, that is. Thank you very much for having me, Bosso.
Well, Cecil, before you leave, let me just ask you, In terms
Sure.
of the shelters, what are you hearing about the shelters in the various communities?
Well, of course, there are shelters, at least one shelter in every community, but you would also note that there are what we call regional shelters.
Mhm.
And that was one of the initiatives I was involved with after Hurricane Maria, and recommended that we start with at least two regional shelters, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. And of course, they are completed. There's the West Coast one in Jimmet, and there's the East Coast one in Castle Bruce. And these shelters can hold up to about 500 people. And the thing about it is, it's not specifically for the communities that they are in. It's really for the area, the entire area, the district, and sometimes it can even be used further afield. There's also another large shelter in the Layu area. And I'm sure those of you on the panel would remember the whole issue of the floodings of 1997-98 in the Layu area. And one of the recommendations, well, I was involved with that at the time. I was head of the local agency, and one of the suggestions was to build a shelter. It was long in coming. It's only opened last year, but it's there right now and can be used. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a simulation exercise which I was asked to sort of look over to give some feedback on later as to how it was executed. There was this exercise on bringing people into the shelter and even having them spend the night and what have you, and that was done successfully. I think it's the government's intention to put one of these large shelters in every district. It would not be necessary in every community, but every district, and all the catchment areas, all the extended areas of these districts and communities would be the better for these large shelters. But we still have our schools and our community centers and our churches. One good thing about the regional shelters initiative is that after an event, if you have people in schools, you can move these people quickly so that schools can recommence and take them to the regional shelters and have them continue sheltering there. Because that's one of the things that plagued us for many years, that people continued living in schools for several weeks and schools couldn't reopen. So that will aid that aspect of disaster management very well.
Yes.
Very
Thank
good.
you very much.
Well, I think Cecil said it all. He covered the bases, and I think we just look forward to the public following those very sensible protocols, and we look forward to, as I said, fingers crossed for a mild season, and that we avoid the worst of it.
Yes. Well, Cecil, thank you very much. You caution persons going to the shelters that they should not go with their hands swinging like they go into a 5-star. They're going somewhere for
Yeah, that's you see, that's the thing, and it doesn't matter how much caution you caution them, they still come that way. But yeah, you see, as you say, it's not a hotel you're going to, so you have to come with something, and not only the food and what have you. It's always advisable that you come with something light to sleep on in the event that you have to overnight for a couple of nights. So a comforter, blankets, sheets, and pillow. Everybody cannot bring a mattress and what have you, but if you have a piece of foam and things of that nature, you can always bring it to the shelter. Because when you go there, you can never tell how long you're going to stay there. And also change of clothing and what have you, and some of the other things you would need for hygienic things you would need. So that is also advisable.
Mostly if you have little children.
Yeah, well, I mean, you even add into it also, because if you have little children, you have to bring milk, you have to bring some
Yeah.
biscuit, you have to bring.
Mhm.
You might be able to stay without, but these children will always be crying for something. So,
That's right.
so
Yeah.
you have to provide them with that. One thing I forgot to say is that any sheltering we have to do, well, last year, this year, and so on, we also have to remember the COVID environment and the
Mhm.
protocols and some of the things that. So it's always advisable that people go to the shelter with their masks. It is quite possible that you will not. I mean, if a storm is if a storm is approaching, or hurricane is approaching, you cannot talk about social distancing or physical distancing. You have to try to take in everybody, because you do not want to leave anyone outside to perish. But you just have to maintain your masks and any sanitizing and cleaning the shelters, and things of that nature. And then after the event, you can then start to do your physical distancing by sending people to other shelters that are not fully occupied. I always advise, when I do some of this training and discussions in communities, I always tell our shelter managers that you cannot deny anybody entry on the approach of a storm, because you would not want the next morning that you hear somebody's body was found, and just to find this is the person you denied an entry. So you take everybody, but immediately after the event, you try to thin out you thin out your crowd for varying reasons. The COVID that's with us right now, and any other simple cold and flu and what have you, because these things they catch very easily. If a child has a running nose and a cold, then you can bring down the whole shelter with just that. So we have to also be mindful of a lot of those things.
Okay.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you very much, Cecil.
Okay, welcome anytime.
Yeah, sure. And like the saying goes, take warning, people, and prepare yourself. We are in the hurricane season. Let's pray that none of this come to us, or to nobody anyway, because those of us who experience Hurricane David in 79, and those of us who experience Maria, and even before that, Erica, can say we do not want to have another of these kind of disaster. So thank you again, Cecil, and I hope people took note of the advice that you gave to them. Okay, we're going to now Kanisha Etienne. The news we got, the story we got on Tuesday, the 7th of June, that she was adopted at her home and went into the bushes with a madman. All of us were angry when the news came out, angry with the madman, because we go by the story we were told, and the police set out to do what they were to do, and they called for assistance from the public. But if there's always a difference between search and rescue and just search, looking for somebody who went missing. If a person, if their home went missing, something their head is not well, and they just go for a walk or so whatever, then after 24 hours they're not back, you report it, and then you'll get certain advice, who to look out for, what the person wear, what the person, complexion and height and so forth. But with adopted of a person, and more so, let's say a child, it means that based on what we were told, that the gentleman, young man in the bushes with her, dangerous, with cutlass and so forth. But it so happened that all of us wanted the child to be found and taken to a home to her parents safely. The Freedom Party early when the news came out, put out a news release and asking for, in the release, we sympathize and we, ask for immediate, release of the child, and that she be taken to her parents safely. It's tomorrow make it a month since she gone, and I mean, it's heartbreaking when you go to your bed with all of this rain falling and you cannot remember the child in the bushes. It's not a cat or a dog or a pig, it's a child.
Right.
And that breaks your heart, and more so with all the searches that have been, surrounded around by the police and some civilian, I mean, we didn't find the child up to now, neither a body up to now. So there need to be closure in this thing, and the police at some point may want to call off the search, but I think the investigation in this matter must continue so that we can get closure to this situation. So particularly it's heartbreaking. It's almost a month, tomorrow make it a month, and this poor child is nowhere to be found. And the person that we thought went with her, that person was killed, and you get all stories right or wrong, but that person that protected to the child was killed, and the child was left, probably fending for herself, and so forth. I was saying to somebody just tonight, if somebody have that child in their home, and all this effort has been made,
Right.
and they're not releasing that child, then that person themselves is, to me, has a problem in their own humanity.
Definitely in the humanity, and definitely should face very serious repercussions and consequences if that is the case. But as you said, Mr. Boston, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think of a young girl, 12 years old, trying to survive, or maybe captured or enclosed or restrained in some manner, and for a month. I mean, it's really horrifying to think of what that child is going through, what has that child has gone through, the sort of conditions that she has endured. It's really heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking for us as a community. And we could see the response from all of us. But as a community, there was outrage, there was sadness, there was fear. Many people went to bed many days, very sad. And you could see in that moment our humanity as Dominicans surface, as many Dominicans poured out to search and to try to help find the young child. There was just outpouring of sympathy to the family. There was outpouring of support. For a moment, our country paused, and you could see the sort of humanity that we are known for surface, and the sort of humanity, frankly, that for a while, I think all of us was getting concerned that we were becoming a nation that had forgotten how to be kind and concerned of the other. And so that was a positive that came out of that, but it is very, very, very sad situation to see the young lady. And I think as we talk about this more, I mean, things may not always work out well. Life is a thing where you have a lot of unknowns, and we do the best we can to cope and to survive. And things don't always work out well. So the hope for outcome, the best hope for outcome for the young lady, may or may not always work out well, and we have to be prepared for those things. But I think as a society and as a community, we can demand certain things. We can't control all the outcomes. Many of those are out of our hands, but I think we can control the process by which we deal with situations like this that come to the forefront. And I think three fundamental, basic things, three pillars needs to be, I think, in place, and it reveals, I think, this incident, the lack of process. There's a lack of process in many things we do in Dominica, but this one reveals the lack of process in place to handle this sort of contingencies. I mean, we needed to have a process in place that we had training and the trained personnel to handle rescue and search and rescue operations. That there was a protocol in place to dictate the steps, the procedures, the communication plan, the restraint strategy for captors, the way we work with the public. There should have been a strategy in place, because abductions and missing persons are a regular phenomenon, frankly, in most societies. And so it revealed a big flaw, a lack of process development, police force to have that in place and to be able to implement that, or get the resources in, or network for the resources in our sister islands. But the plan is there ahead of time. And I think that this incident revealed a lack of that infrastructure, human, physical, training infrastructure to handle this event. So a lack of professionalism, and quite frankly, was exhibited by this event. And we have to do better than this. You know, as I said, there was an outpouring of support, and the police was engaged in what they're doing, and we all wish for the best, but we do have to say this is an opportunity for learning, an opportunity for improvement. The second big part of this thing is that when this happened is the sort of transparency. When such events like that are going on and they affect the nation and the national psyche, we need empathy from our leaders, and we need transparency to reassure the public that everything that can be done is being done and being done the right way. And there is no implications of cover-ups. There is enough trauma in our national psyche not to introduce the trauma of a possible cover-up, or people not doing things well, or some sort of other thing to distract people from focusing on rescuing that young lady. And so these, to me, are the two key takeaways that we have to do better in the unfortunate event that this happens again. And as I said, this is not something that's so unusual in society. So transparency and professional preparedness and having a process ahead of time, just as we prepare for hurricanes every year, we should have a process in place for those sort of issues in a rugged nation like ours.
Mhm.
Well, I believe I support what you've said, but my concern is the kidnapping of Kenisha the problem. That is the symptom of the problem. And I would like to focus a bit on the problem. Because in all our communities for the last 20 years, there are between 5 to 20 young persons, predominantly male young persons, who for some reason or another have been affected by drugs, societal problems, psychological problems, and are in those communities threatening their families and the communities. And for over 20 years, I noticed this development. And the police service and the psychiatric ward should have been able to put together a task force of 20, 30 policemen to deal with the national problem. This is not the problem. Kenisha's kidnapping is a symptom of the problem. So when an individual who doesn't take his medication and or is unstable, a report is made, you call the squad to deal with them in a humane way so that it doesn't end up what happened there. I'm very concerned. Even the outpouring of support is great that we as a nation saw the plight of the young world and presented ourselves to work. But what did that do? It contaminated the search because so many people were in the area. And it's high time that we stop focusing on the symptoms of the problem and deal with the actual problem. I'm very concerned about the loss. This young lady, I don't know what I would do if it was my daughter, my grandchild, or relative. This is mind-boggling. But as a police force, I mean, and you mentioned transparency, Patty, you're hearing conflicting news from a police service. What is happening? There is a facts, or rumors, or falsehoods. But when you have one senior police officer conflicting with another, it raises the question, what is going on in the force? I think it's high time we as a nation recognize that we have a problem with our young men and drugs and address that problem. How do we deal with our young persons when they are troubled? I mean, This is an illness, when people are on drugs. You have to treat them humanely, but there are ways and means of dealing with that. And when I listen to the radio, I just turn it off because we're not addressing the problem. I noticed sometimes NJAM attempted to move in that direction, and I was very pleased. But as a nation, what is the government doing for our young men? We're losing a great percentage of our young men with this drug problem. And we have to address it. And I'm appealing to the people in our police force to prepare a plan on how do we reinstate these young men into society. When they are on drugs, end up trouble, either do not take their medication. We need to have a task force, a rapid response task force to get them back to the psychiatric facilities for treatment. You cannot have a police officer coming to us and telling us for 2 weeks this man is in a community creating problems. What has he done? And you coming to us telling us you're incompetent, this and that. I cannot deal with those things. I think we as a nation must recognize that we're using our youth, losing some of our youth through this drug problem.
Yeah, it's a good point that you raised, Michael. It definitely is a good point, and I agree with you that there is a deeper problem here. There's certainly a deeper dysfunction in our society that leads not only to that, but you can see an increase in sexual abuse. You can see an increase in physical abuse.
Child abuse.
Child abuse, yes. There's just all those symptoms of a certain psychological stress and dysfunction operating, and drug problems, and because drugs not always, but often result from people who just don't have hope or find a way out of reality. There is a certain pressure on the Dominican people, and as you rightly identified, even more so in young men in particular, because young men are dropping out of those schools, they're not getting this sort of education. The young women find a way to move on, but the young men are aimless, and that leads directly to some of the dysfunctional behavior. So you're absolutely right. There is a bigger discussion to be had and about these issues.
Jeff, I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think that first of all, let me just send some encouragement to both families. I mean, I think even Keon, his mom, the situation she's in right now too. Both families are grieving, and the way these things are going on. Let me just really send my sentiments to them, because I mean it's difficult for both families with what's happening, and this is a very difficult situation. But we need to go to the issue here. The bigger issue is policy. I think in Dominic, the government need to realize they need to put policies in place. What is the police force policy on adoption? What is the police force policy on kidnapping? What is the police force policy? Do they have a policy on that? And what concerned me the most was when I heard someone from the police force went on the radio and said that if anyone comes into with Keon, and then they have the right for self-defense. From the time I heard this on the radio, I was like, we just opened a whole new can of worms. And unfortunately, what I was afraid of happening ended up happening. You have a situation like this, your police force need to be trained better. You cannot be looking for someone who kidnapped a child, and then you go to the person home and then you start burning stuff and showing those food on social media. That is wrong, because you need those evidence for when the dog come and to do the rescue research and all of that. And this was done poorly. This was done poorly. It was not done well. And I would like to thank all the civilians, the many civilians, men and women, who came together to look in search for this young lady and this young man. And I must say that if there's one thing that probably brought the nation together in the sense of trying to work together, that was one good thing that happened out of that. But these families are hurt, and I really think that the police need to give both families an apology as to the way they handle the situation, and also the many people that went out there and tried their best to do that. They need to be complimented for that. And I just hope that this is a lesson that is learned by the police, that they need to handle those situations much better. And in the future, they can look at that. They need to look at SOPs. You really have this police force maybe need someone to sit with them to write a list of SOPs for them, meaning standard operation procedures for events like that. And government also need to look at their policy into some of these activities. It's difficult, and there's a lot I could probably say on this, but I know the essence of time. I just want to say to the two families that, be strong, and if there's anything, any information you have, you go to share with the police, and the police keep this information the way that it should be treated, because this is a very, very sensitive time for them. So all the best to both families. And Dominica, let's just keep praying, hopefully, that we can find this young lady well and alive.
Yes. Michael,
Yes,
you want to say something?
one of the things that concern Johnson is, and Jeff alluded to it, you must have procedures in place to deal with those things. While I support the empathy of the public and coming forward to help, is that the best approach? You have somebody who is kidnapped and you're calling on people who is not trained in how do you deal with a hostage situation. That might be detrimental to the situation. The affected seems that when they burn the guy's property,
Somebody should be arrested for that.
Yes.
There's arson,
right, not only arson, but there's evidence that could have been destroyed, whether or not
Yeah.
the young lady was there. They could find a strand of hair. They could find a strand of hair at the home of where he say he kidnapped, to see whether the gentleman was there. There's a lot of concerns that I've raised. Okay, I'm not saying that we as a people mustn't move with empathy to assist, but when we're doing that, we have to do it within the protocols that could ensure that we recover the young lady, not to be detrimental. We have a lot of resources at our disposal that were not used, like drones with facial recognition. You going after somebody who has a hostage, who is a minor, you cannot go and he's unstable, he's sick. How do you deal with that? How do you get him to reveal where the child is? And these are things that we as a people need to get professionals to prepare the necessary protocol, as Jeff said, to be able to ensure that there's a success in finding this individual that is kidnapped. And that is of great concern. I am very much concerned we're operating at a level where we're mixing issues. It is clear that we are way behind and we have to put our act together.
All right. Very
Well, Michael, you made the point about the tampering with the evidence,
Yeah.
and that should not be. I think, as I said in the opening, when the news came out, that's the news, because we were not there. We went by the news that we got from the adopted father and those who were immediately involved. So we went to that, and a lot of us were angry, but you have to have sober heads to deal with this thing, right? Sober heads. And in a society, you have various institutions, and they have their role. Now, you don't expect the prime minister to go to the bush and look for a child. You don't expect the leader of the opposition to go in the bush and look for a child. You don't expect ministers to go in the bush and look for a child. There is the agency for that. And therefore, when people volunteer to assist, you need to caution them as to how to go about it. They can't just volunteer and there's a back canal going into the bush. It has to be properly manned. And if you have 3 or 4 groups of civilians, you must have at least a couple of police officers in those groups leading the groups.
Before they go out, professionals, they have to have a debriefing.
Yes, no.
And you cannot send civilians there without a debriefing who's not trained. Trained persons have to have a debriefing to know how they're going to approach it. If you see the man, do not engage him. Let's see where he goes and sleep. And then after we go there and see the child is there. You know, there's so many things. When I'm listening to that, I'm saying I'm not in a country.
Yes.
Because who am I? Dominica is not a country.
It's tight.
I do not know if I'm thinking out of the box. But common sense, just applying. And another thing is, you're innocent until proven guilty. How you can go and burn the man's house? And again, he's mental, he could do something wrong. And you telling me a whole week you have a mental, unstable, sick individual, and you're not moving to secure him and bring him to the psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
What is happening?
But what is even worse is that when you point out those things, rather than taking corrective action, they look at you almost like you become an enemy. And the society can run that way. You have to take the suggestion that comes forward and see how, not everything somebody say that you use, but the good ones take it. I want to commend NJAM, National Joint Action Movement, because they had last week Wednesday a panel discussion on that issue.
Yes.
And you had Cara Slingford, symbol of Bloomcrease, Peter St. Jean, you had John Charles, and they did a fantastic job in really seeing where we are.
Yeah, they recognize some of our deficiencies.
Because they're what they call copycats. And if you're not careful, this thing can repeat itself. And would like to be prepared properly for those eventualities. Electoral reform in our country, as its growth, if the electoral reform, the Electoral Commission is doing its work fairly, professionally, and with due respect, because every party must be seen and given the same respect in the community that where its election is governed by an independent body or group, or whatever we want to call it, to ensure that our elections are free and fair, and every person who participates, win or lose, will feel that they were in a very fair competition. And when you have that, people are happy because they're engaged, are involved. They're not, if you like, sabotaged and so forth. And therefore, you get more relaxed mind into the development of our country and what democracy produce. Because if in Dominican you feel, boy, I'm just in my community, and then the Labour Party feel, for you to be a member of parliament, you must be Labour rights. So if you want to be a member of parliament, don't go to any other party, be a Labour right. It's a sickening feeling. A very bad behavior in our country, and the playing field has been leveled. We have been calling and talking about this for years. And I mean, I understood some of the things that Dennis Barron is suggesting the government is happy. They're not happy about it, and therefore they are delaying the reports.
So, extremely delayed.
Yes.
We've had many delays on this thing. We've reached out to the commission several times. We've been promised meetings, we've been promised reports, and those of course have been cancelled and pushed back and so on. And it's very obvious now that there is some serious delay tactics going on with this. And if that is in fact the case, I actually want to proactively commend the commission for doing a courageous job, for pointing out the things that needed to be pointed out. And as we feared, quite frankly, that if that was the case, that there would be efforts made either to delay the issuing of this thing significantly and drag it all to the next election, or have the report come out and then drag out the discussion and the implementation until after the elections. I mean, we expected that. But as you said, Mr. Boston, the elections, not simply elections, but democracy is the foundation of a progressive society now. Without the choice, a real choice, not a token choice, not simply that we have elections, we're there for a democracy. We have to have meaningful elections. We have to have fair elections. We have to have true democracy, where opponents do not feel threatened, where opponents have access to media outlets and to other outlets to express their views, where supporters of other parties do not feel that they place themselves at peril, at economic peril, at political peril, if they support alternative parties, that their livelihoods will be taken away from them. This is not true democracy. This is a coercion society, a captured society. And that is what we're fighting for, to point out to our fellow Dominicans that from our democracy has been captured. It's a democracy. We certainly have elections, but a democracy is much more than elections. As we said, we have to have the right cultural values. We have to have the right cultural values in our leadership to respect and to hold sacred the notion of democracy, so that when they get to the edge of violating the intention of democracy, that they have the right value set to restrain themselves, because they value democracy in and of itself. A democracy will only thrive when the people embed it within their minds, right? A democracy is not necessarily secured by any military force or by any other means, but a democracy is secured when the value of democracy is so highly valued by every member of society that they will fight for it, that they will insist on it, that they will ensure that it happens, that they will in fact set aside political inclinations in deference to the need for democracy. And that is what we see eroded in our island, the spirit, the intention of democracy, not just the law, but the intended outcomes of a democratic process is being violated. And so electoral reform is, it's so obviously needed in this island for us. It's so obviously needed that I think it's obvious to everyone. What prevents it is political machinations and political advantage, taking advantage of a fractured society, taking advantage of removing those things that should constrain abuse of democracy, removing those so that political advantage can be.
Yes. Hello, good evening, you're on. Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. Okay, sorry about that. The caller can call back.
Well, party leader, I support you. I want to tell you, are we in a democracy? I listened to the other side a few weeks ago and recently, and I gather from them that just from their first program after they may have received that report, that they've received the report, but they don't support the recommendations. Yeah. So they are doing things and saying that if we take part in the election and lose, when they implement those recommendations, we will say that we stole the election. We're asking for amendments for electoral reform.
Okay, let me try to take this call. Hello, good evening. How are you? Yes, he's hearing you.
Yeah, brother, how is life? Because
Jeff is here. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, they are. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes.
I want to say something.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Senior Byron has been an excellent West Indian and jurist and a professional, and I'm sure he gave them the report by now, unless he would apologize to the people of the Caribbean. Remember when he said that the people of the Caribbean need to know as early as possible who the elected officials are. And when there's a petition, it must be heard in a timely manner. Okay? Now, I get from Kenny Green saying on the other side, the system, we pretending like the system is broken. How can he suggest that? This guy has the gall to suggest that. His party, the Labour Party, recommended that if you vote, if I pay you money to come to Dominica to vote for me and you vote for somebody else, I can have legal recourse. That is the recommendation we were demonstrating against passing in Parliament. And I'm telling you, for him to say the system is not broken, he is suggesting that the Labour Party knows who you vote for. It's no longer a secret ballot. They're suggesting it's no longer a secret ballot. And that is one of the fundamentals of a democracy. Your vote is a secret ballot. And the way they were conducting themselves, especially making that recommendation, tell me that the Labour Party knows the system is broken and they think we forget what democracy is. And that is the fundamental problem.
This is not I wouldn't even characterize it as the system is broken. The system has been broken, has been dismantled. The system has been dismantled. It did not simply fall apart on its own or by accident.
But he said it's not broken.
It's problematic.
It's where the problem. The opposition is the problem. That's what he was saying.
That comment should be dismissed out of hand.
Okay.
Clearly, this guy's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement. Anybody with a modicum of common sense and decency knows that this election system has been rigged to the advantage in every way possible of the Dominican Labour Party. I mean, so Kenny's comments should just be dismissed as silly.
People say it's rubbish.
It's rubbish.
Busso,
Jeff, one second, let me take a call then. Hello, good evening. We're doing fine. How are you? Yes, I do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You too. Thank you, Jeff. You're making a point.
Yeah, callers, when you call, speak a little louder for those of us who are virtual so we can hear you better. What I was saying, also about the whole electoral reform, I think the government should know that people are not fools and that we know that they're not serious about electoral reform. Just today, I read an article on DNO about that they are looking to extend the whole rush of new passports to December. I always ask the question, how comes you're able to get 60,000 people new passports in less than 6 months, but you have 2, 3, 4, 5 years in some cases to do a re-registration and you cannot do that? This is the question I'm asking is like, why can you get all these people able to get passports done in 1 year and you cannot get half of these people get a re-registration list for people to vote in 2, 3, 4 years. So it doesn't make sense. I don't really believe these guys are serious about electoral reform. If you look at Antigua, when the government they did electoral reform, when they do the new registration, all of that, cleanse the list, the government lost the election, right? So we know very well that they are not interested in electoral reform. And when people come in and talk about nonsense about there's no need for voters ID or there's no need for that, for Christ's sake, we should have some sort of ID at the polls when we go to vote so we can prove who we are and match that identification. So we need to stop playing the politics game of electoral reform and let's face the bigger issue. They know very well anyhow they cleanse the list or they have people going to vote with an ID is required by law. They will lose the election. So I don't believe those guys are serious about electoral reform.
Okay. Yes. Well, in terms, if you
Well-
quickly,
But also, I want to make a statement. There seem to be some statements making to the effect that the CCJ rulings are questionable. I have a lot of confidence in the CCJ. The ruling sent back the matter on the treating to magistrate court. I understood that the senior counsel lied to the CCJ. And if we had a bar association, he would have been put up for questioning. Okay? Now, what happened? They put a very amateur, young head of prosecution, director of prosecution,
DBP.
DPP, in place who now pressed a case that has been an issue that has been in the public domain for over 20 years. She now pressed that. That tells me that the fact that under Evelina Baptist, that this was never nully processed and requests were made from what I understand.
Yeah.
Clearly shows that we have a major problem, okay? And the CGJ highest cut of the land was ignored to put the matter back in the back where it's supposed to be as a criminal matter.
Yes, our energy, vulnerability, and what can we do? Leader, can you? Well, let me take this call before you.
Correct.
Hello, good evening. Yes, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening, Jim. Good evening.
Yes. Thank you very much. The lines are lighting up now. Let's take this call. Hello, good evening. Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much. You all got the question?
Well, I did, and I mean, we're a little short on time, so I won't go into this into a lot of detail, but I think we have sort of addressed this, right? Not every vote will count equally if you have a system that disadvantages the opposition, that so advantages the incumbent government that really the vote of those in opposition is minimized because they do not get a fair shot at having their vote count just as equally and just as the same as others. The playing field is not level. You do not get your message out. You are put in a position where an election can be called at any time, so you do not have a fair chance to get prepared with your message. You have a government that earns money and from foreign governments who like their particular policies and funds them to maintain their policy. So does every citizen vote count equally? In theory, it should. The reality is this government does everything it can to make sure that legitimate votes of voters are outdone by shenanigans that diminishes the value and the weight of that opposition vote.
We go into item
Yeah,
five.
let's move on because
The time is
against us. Yeah, so on item 5, we're talking about energy vulnerability and what we can do about it. And that is a very important topic that I think we need to be talking about regularly, and I think we will. We need to talk about, we're an island. We're an isolated place thousands of miles away from any mainland, right? We're a little gem in the sea. And we have to realize that in that sort of situation, when the policies and the particular technologies that you pursue for energy independence is very, very important. We need a certain level of energy independence, autonomous indigenous energy capacity. We do not have that if we're importing energy, right? Because when you import oil and diesel and all the different fuels, you're actually importing energy onto the island. You convert it from one from fuel into electricity, but you're really importing electricity essentially. You just need the conversion to make that happen. So when you're in a country, a small vulnerable country, thousands of miles away from where oil is produced, you should not be importing energy. Your entire focus should be on creating indigenous forms of energy, so that you can negate those disadvantages of supply and cost and transportation costs and the pollution in the small limited space. And we have no coherent strategy in Dominica to get there. We do not even seem to realize or have a focused policy discussion around what it is that we need to do to achieve energy independent at a cost that is lower, matches or lower than we currently have now. And that is at the root of this crisis, really, that we're experiencing right now. We're experiencing a crisis of extreme increases in the electricity cost. The percentage of business revenues and profits that have to go towards energy costs is outrageous. No small business, no business sectors they are constrained, they are bound, they are tied up because they cannot expand their operations due to those escalated energy costs that makes it non-profitable to do certain activities. And so that is at the root of the problem. We're seeing it manifest itself now, how vulnerable we are to any shocks. The shocks of the energy prices in diesel is manifesting, rippling through the economy, devastating effects, and everyone is crying and bawling. But that goes back to not having an energy policy, not having a policy position, not having a vision to achieve energy self-sufficiency. And that is a crying shame on an island which has the potential, so much potential for autonomous energy generation. We have wind power, solar power, wave power, not rivers. We have abundant, the most rivers in the Caribbean. We have the potential for hydro in so many ways, micro hydro, larger hydro plants, and steam. We have it all, geothermal. And yet 20 something plus years, we do not have a system that can put this together in a coherent plan to make us energy independent. And that's just a disaster as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, good to get going. Hello, good evening. We're doing fine. We're doing fine. How are you? Mhm.
So I would just close by saying, this is a very serious matter. This is a matter that will definitely require some serious discussion and consultation on the ground with the people, various civic organizations. But it is something that we have to embark upon and correct.
Yeah.
Because election has consequences, and if you have a system, as I say, whereby the election appears to be guilty that is not free and fair, then we have a serious problem. We no longer have a problem. So I just wanted to make that report, but as I said, I know you're winding up, so
Yeah.
the program for discussion, and I'm listening.
Thank you very much. Hello, let's call it one. Okay, Michael, you want to make some
Yes,
brief comments?
Well, based on what Alvin said, I agree with him 100%. And all I want to say that if you have a democracy, you just have to examine what is going on. There's a lack of respect for the rule of law, for security, or security force, for policies, so that you can prepare strategies. There's none in place. When it comes to conflict of interest, just imagine our highest office is being sued by a gentleman who was a minister today and a president tomorrow. Conflict of interest. He should have reclused himself when he was nominated. And equal numbers of persons in every constituency. So you can dump money in a constituency of 1,000 votes and don't focus on a party with 4,000 votes and just, win a seat.
Yeah, let's see this call. Hello, good evening. Yes, good night. Yes.
Yes, good night, good night.
Good evening.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
In terms of the energy vulnerability, Johnson, I know electoral reform is important, but our energy policy is vital. Had we gotten in energy policy, we would have determined that spending $140 million on developing geothermal and you cannot light one light bulb was a waste of money. Because for $140 million, which I understand is what they spent so far, maybe more, we could have had wind, solar, and hydro, 100% increase in what we have now. So we could double our capacity and just have the diesel as standby in the event we have a failure in any one of those things. Because You could increase our output between 12 and 20 megawatts in those three areas. But what have we done? We run in this country. Look, the government owes Domlek, yet they're buying Domlek. Who is going to police the accounts receivable with government? So you understand, we have massive conflict of interest there. And even in the geothermal project, what influence did the NGOs and the partners in development play in that geothermal? How can you have a minister as a consultant and an ambassador at the same time being paid by government on geothermal to the country? You know, this thing, there's massive conflicts of interest. So you see, I am very much concerned in the geothermal development and the lack of policy that we have. Because with a policy, you can know what strategies and amended laws you have to implement to achieve your policy objectives. There's nothing like that. So we have a major problem, and now government is putting the persons to run Domlek with what they've been doing with a coffee plant and the tissue culture lab, and so I'm very worried.
Okay, let's take item 6.
Yes, the time is upon us, but let's touch on it, and we may, on next show we'll have to continue. But on item 6, I mean, because item 6, we try as the Freedom Party to not only present what the problems are, and I think we have to also look at what the solutions are. And we have to present, I think, a positive agenda, which is what we're about, a positive, innovative, creative agenda on how we create an economy that works for all. And the energy policy that we were talking about earlier and the energy plan is very important. Some of the things that Michael mentioned is very important. But on a larger scale, we have to have a very focused strategy as well, in the same manner as we look at the energy policy. A strategy on how do we develop an economy that is a 21st century economy, that is a well-paid economy, that will take us to the next level. And we've had that discussion in different forums, and we keep continuing to have it. The Freedom Party's position is that we need to create a knowledge economy. Because what we have in Dominica, we know for sure that we have, is people who take education seriously, people who take training seriously, people who want to excel at the university level around the globe and to become very capable and competent professionals. Therefore, our human capital pipeline is prime. We have the right cultural values to learn, to take it seriously, and to excel at it, to do well at it. We're prime. We need to recognize that things have changed. In the year 2000, we missed the boat in jumping on the digital revolution, the information revolution. We missed that boat. Unfortunately, we had a leadership at that time that was frankly blind and not thinking out of the box creatively and in a modern manner. We're still pursuing the some sort of small-minded, small approaches to development, or really no approach to development. There has been no core plan for 25 years. But we have to recognize that the world has changed, and we're now at a pivotal point, which is called the fourth industrial revolution. It really is a pivotal moment, as pivotal as the creation of the industrial revolution, when steam energy happened in 1821 and the world transformed overnight into a modern economy. And that is what we face right now. We are at the steam engine stage where this whole new modern economy is going to evolve. And we have to be aware of that, and we have to take advantage of that. We have to be a country that focuses on that develops a national plan around developing that sort of economy. And when we say, we don't want people to misunderstand, and when we say we need knowledge economy, we need to focus on 21st century skills like cybersecurity, analytics, cloud computing. These are the things that are driving the modern world now. It's no longer digital. It's also about data and the data envelope that surrounds everything, and the Internet of Things and things talking to each other, artificial intelligence. We need to believe in ourselves as a society that we can do those things. We have Dominican professionals all over the world doing those things, and we need to start moving into the direction of creating a future that the young people can get excited about. The digital natives of our country who grew up with this technology are primed and ready to embrace it. But right now they are consumers of it. We need to make them producers of it. And we need to have a serious national conversation and a national strategy on how do we participate in this breaking wave that all people at the forefront of technology and societal studies will tell you. There's a breaking wave coming. It's going to transform the world. And we need to be part of that equation. We cannot afford to miss the boat on this as we've done before. But in order to get that, we have to transform our society, our politics, because the sort of politics we have now cannot work for a technocratic society where you want the best brains, the best ideas to flourish, regardless of political orientation. We need people who can execute those things and can embrace those things and can make that vision happen. And that's what the Dominican Freedom Party is all about.
Well, also, I support party leader 100%. The knowledge economy policy has to be put in place and a strategy to achieve those. And some of the things that we have to do. And as a small country, we need to invest in our young people. We need to invest in our people. We find too often that we are being sidelined and foreigners come in here and take over. They've taken over the construction sector. You have Chinese, you have persons from outside who are given opportunities far beyond what a Dominican would have. And that is one of the problems that we have. We're not saying we do not want foreigners, but give locals equal opportunity. You have a major contract building roads around the island, and you have foreign contractors bringing their own trucks, and truckers cannot meet their basic requirements to keep their little trucking business afloat. And these are the concerns that we have. And a knowledge economy can address those things in many ways by putting in place a proper policy that will ensure that we move forward with high value items, and those existing ones, keep them afloat so that they can bolster the economy.
And they will be kept afloat because once you have that core economic engine, you fully follow boats. You need more agricultural produce, you need more services, you need more building, you need more entertainment, you need more restaurants, food, lodging, and so forth. And so all boats float.
And all the infrastructure to support.
And all the infrastructure and all the building trades and everything takes off. But you need to have an economic core, and this is what our economic core should be. And there is no economic core in Dominic right now. We got it.
Yeah.
If you pick behind the curtain, there's nothing, no engine there.
Yes, Jeff, you want to make any comments on this?
Well, first of all, energy, you need to have, again, I believe in policies. Before you do things in place, you need to have policies in place. And I really think that, I don't know how many people know aware of this, but in Guadeloupe, and I know there's a few people in the current Labour Party government, and one of them had a decent position in the city of Roseau, who have had connections in buoyant Guadeloupe. And I think when you go into geothermal electricity, when you go into geothermal, you have to look at some of these things. And buoyant Guadeloupe has a plant. And if I was part of the government, before we go into this, my advice to the government would be, why don't we take a trip to Guadeloupe, buoyant, and look at the plant they have, find out some information, how is it working, how much energy, what's the percentage of that energy is supplying the tongue of buoyant and in the environment? Is it even capable to go into the Saint-Pierre area? So I'm in the Basta area. I think that these are the things they need to do. You need to do research. We have Guadeloupe right there. We could have go there and find out some of that information, so we know what we're getting ourselves into before we go into that geothermal electricity. That's one thing. We can look at the cost of that versus wind turbine. For example, from some of the work I tried to do a little bit of research on those wind turbine, how they work. It looked like one of those wind turbines is capable of electrifying the entire communities of Soufriere, Scott, St. Gallen, on Point Michel, and some other areas. How best you that you do it? What's the cost of that? How many of that can electrify the entire Dominic and use Dominic as a backup? So these are the things, you have to do your research. You have to look at costs, do some cost analysis, what you have, and you can go to that. As far as the vision and creating new Dominican economy, I always say that it begins with education. I must say that we have to look at the college and the way that the college is run. What do we need to make sure that that institution has a valid bachelor's degree? That when somebody graduates with a bachelor's degree in Dominica or master's, Do they even offer masters in Dominica? I'm subject to correction, but I don't think they do. Now, that bachelor's degree, is it good enough that I can go to all the universities and have that transcript transfer to that university? Why don't we're talking about food security, we're talking about our economy and building it. What are the causes? Why don't we look at Dominica? What do we need? What do we need to get our young people involved into? As it was said on the program yesterday, I think it was. What do we do with the elementary schools? Why don't we integrate that STEM program into place and get our people getting into those technical skills? So therefore, when they graduate from there, you set up jobs already set up for them. And Mr. Boston Michael, you guys should remember, very you to remember, during the days of the Clifton Dupini Community College, it was set up where people are going into internship, where people go from the college, they get into training, the skills program, and get into internship programs. These are the areas where I think we need to go if we are very serious about moving the economy in a new direction.
Yes. Yes, well, it's already after 10, as a matter of fact.
We can go all night.
So we can go all night,
I
but
guess we have to.
but we have to stop. But I have a few comments. This government is in office for more than 20 years. And the Prime Minister is Prime Minister for about 15 or so years. Okay? And agriculture has always been a major pillar of our economy. And while you introduce new areas into the economy, you should not allow agriculture to disappear, because you need food security.
Sure.
And plus agriculture brought what they call income into the rural areas. The government for the last 15 years or so has really destroyed the agricultural sector, Only now the Prime Minister is saying now in 2022 that his biggest focus is on agriculture. And he had a meeting with some farmers and said, while education and health is important, but his biggest focus now is in agriculture. Where were you, Mr. Prime Minister, 20 years ago?
Okay.
And you met agriculture there. They brought in a coffee plant from Venezuela, came in.
They brought in a plant, not a coffee plant. They have made a cup of coffee.
It is sitting there.
They brought a coffee
But
plant.
it was a coffee plant.
But they told us it's a coffee plant. They brought in something here. They have made a cup of coffee.
Right. So the whole thing is there. And if the government was serious about agriculture, you would assist the farmers with seedlings to grow coffee, and you can produce and export.
And find out.
But the thing is just still not standing there. Another thing though is they are very busy with these e-passports. Very busy, and they're even going outside of Dominica now to interview people for an e-passport.
Well, they're moving around with a mobile unit in many countries.
Many countries, and
Dominicans are.
Yeah, and they're saying your regular passport will no longer be valid for travel. All right? But I was told by a number of persons that if you apply for passport, you pay $150 adults, and I think for children you pay $75, right? But if you want the passport quicker than the normal time they give it to you, the adult must pay another $150 and the child pay $100. So I'm saying, is that authentic? Is that something that the government is aware of? And if not, it should stop. And those who are involved in that should be charged.
It's fraud.
It's fraud. If the government is involved in that, they can tell you there are persons who renew their passport, the regular passport, they renew it, pay $150 for it, renewal, and got it. And soon after they have to go now to get the e-passport. So the $150 they pay for the old passports, they have lost that. And then they must pay a $150 now for the e-passport. And if they want it in quick time, another $150, and so forth. So really, you ask yourself, why a government that is not creating employment and growing the economy would be so, wickedly engaged in ripping the people,
Extracting, expropriating money from the
from
people.
the people, and so forth. So to me, the minister responsible must come and explain if that is a government policy or not. Because I thought what you could have done, if a person applied for the renew the passport, let's say a month ago or so, 2 months ago, you could just transfer the $150 they had paid into the new passport. Because they just paid it.
If you have a passport, one 2 years or less, they should give you a passport free.
You know, once I didn't go into it, I said, if you just renew your passport, just transfer the money you have paid for that renewal into the new passport. But to make you pay another 150, and then if you want the passport in quick time, another 150, then it's very shameful. And it's your government that has no heart for the people of Dominica. And you know something? Election reform, we spoke about coronavirus, we spoke about the hurricane season, we spoke about the adoption of the Kenosha ATL, electoral reform, our energy vulnerability, vision for creating a new Dominican economy. But you see, electoral reform is key because we need to be able to free up at election time where it can be a free and fair election with no manipulation by the incumbent to use monies, whether it's from government resources or otherwise, to steal and remain in power. Because unless that can happen, let's see what happens. I mean, you have ministers now, and before they say A, they can even study their own future. They say, God thank the Prime Minister. They're talking about their subject matter, the ministry, and they will not say, well, we have done ABCD, and based on resources raised, we have done ABC. No, they take up themselves from the equation. All they have is a mouth to talk. So they talk and then they give all the praise to the Prime Minister. When you have a cabinet like that, you know, that cabinet, that country can't go nowhere. They do a few things in terms of maintenance. The number of things have to be done, but what is the great thing they have done to impact the country? So it's 18 past. Michael, we wind up.
Well, it's a very interesting program, and I think the item 6 should have been way above so we could spend more time on it. But that's how it is. Everything in Dominica seems to be so important, and you know, we need to really find a way to put in place measures to deal with the real problems that we face and not the symptoms of the problem. So I would like to thank our listeners for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to how we could take those things that we discuss on a national level and bring it to the people so we can address it in a forceful way, so they can really put in place a government that will look after the affairs of the children and the children's children. Because Dominica, where it stands, needs to make a drastic change for its people and to put Dominicans first.
Jeff?
Goodbye.
Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, thank you guys for having me on tonight. Thank you to all the listeners who listened, those who called, those who could not get through. I just want to say that we cannot give up the fight. We are too good to keep fighting for what is right for Dominica. As Monsignor John said well in that church service on Sunday, as they celebrate St. Peter's in Scott said, then what about us? What about us? If we truly say we are Christians, why we don't do what is right? Why don't we work together? Because at the end of the day, we can have anything that we have. We're going to die and leave it behind. Why now? Why don't we work together now to build Dominica together? On this note, I want to thank you guys and wishing everyone a very good night.
Yes. Well, particularly before you come, I just want to extend sympathy to the Walsh family in Kingston and Newtown on the passing of Jerry Boy Walsh, the brother of Ozzy Walsh. Ozzy Walsh was a former member of Parliament for the Roseau South constituency. That's his brother. He passed and was buried last week, I think Tuesday, and so forth. So again, our heartfelt sympathy to the Walsh family and Ozzy in particular, and his mother.
Yes, definitely. Let me echo the sentiments as well. I think in wrapping up, I think the whole thrust of what we're talking about, many of the things that we're talking about, we do have the legacy things that we have to deal with. Certainly, many legacy things that we have to think about. But I think at this juncture, what we need as a community, as a society, is to start developing those alternative realities that we want to see in Dominica. We have to start We have to start dreaming together of a new future that we want to embrace. And that new future definitely requires new political leadership. In my opinion, the political leadership we have now are not geared, are not structured, are not engineered or dispositioned for development. You can either develop a country or you can extract from a country. And everything in this current government, in this current administration, in this current social setup is geared at extraction. Very little value creation is happening. There's extraction happening. There's reapportioning of wealth. You take it from this sector and move it to that sector. You take it from the passport sales of a birthright and you move it into your pockets. There's reallocation of wealth going on, an extraction of wealth from the bottom to the top, small cadre at the top. But we have to start to reimagine our Dominican society and what that means. And that means creating value so that we expand the size of the pie, that every Dominican can have the sort of quality of life that we've always dreamed of. And I think that's a conversation that the Freedom Party is initiating, is engaged in. We are presenting a realistic alternative to the sort of society, the extractive society that we have now. We are creating a creative, productive, value-creating society, and we want all of our listeners and all Dominicans to be part of that process.
Okay, party leader, thank you, Michael Astafan, Jeff Bellot, and we say thank you to Cecil, who was here early on to take us through into the hurricane season. And all our listeners, those who call and those who just listen, we want to thank you. We appreciate your input always. And as we said, we'll be here every first Wednesday of the month. And so our next appearance here is on the first Wednesday in August. We are appealing to you out there to assist to keep us going, because democracy have its course, and we have to do as much as we can to keep democracy alive, well, and to keep us fighting for the good things for Dominica. And we want to see Dominicans abroad and Dominicans at home. We're building this collaboration between all Dominicans at home and abroad for the good of Dominica and Dominicans here in Dominica and Dominicans overseas. And the theme is, I think we are we are just not in a position to continue with bad government and bad administration and lazy cabinet. And they feel when they first the prime minister, then that is it. What about their constituency who elected them, and so forth? I even hearing that the prime minister is planning to contest Roswell. And I was told that he said he could better serve to try it. So if Minister can win it, then he feels he can come into Roswell. And I heard this guy, this Senator George, is the one that is promoting for fake acts. So let us keep our ears on the ground and let us ensure that whenever an election is called in Dominica, we give ourselves a break, give ourselves a chance to prosper, to be independent, and to move our country forward. So again, thank you very much. God bless you all, and let's have good night rest, and we'll see you next time, which is the first Wednesday in August 2022. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
After we give Dominicans a chance, us a chance. Us, yes, Dominicans.
No, when I say us in Dominican,
No, say Dominicans.
the us means
They will say it's Freedom Party terrorists.
oh, but you want a chance because you good.
Yeah, no, but give Dominicans a chance. Dominicans have a chance in the right. Not even Labour Party have a chance with their candidates. You know, the man, let's say, like all these candidates, delegates, you don't have delegates anymore, you know.
Who?
Scary to have delegates, you know, you have workers that they pay joke for the Labour Party.
No.
Our because it was telling them, all these are delegates, all we are talking about Labour Party. our party existing without delegates. Who are the ones selecting your candidate? Boy, let me tell you, there are about 4 delegates in Moscow. Quiet. When I go in the television, boy, you know, you making sense. Eh? Oh, that's right.
Awesome.
That's your laptop also?
Hmm?
That's your laptop?
Who?
That's your laptop?
Yes.